What's up, you guys? Good morning, good evening, whatever applies to you. Hope you are staying safe. And today it's time for me to give you guys a video series about a protocol that will help you out in various different ways in terms of recovering from an addiction or being really excitable for all the right things in life, right? So generally speaking, the right things in life will not give you as high of a dopamine spike as the highly excitable things, or like highly highly stimulative things in terms of your brain, right? So the protocol is called Dopamine Detox, and today, starting from today, I'm gonna deliver you guys with a video series that will help you out to understand every single detail that you need to understand in terms of how to do a dopamine detox, what to do, what not to do, how to address that, yada yada yada, the whole nine yard. I'm gonna describe you everything, so I can do it in a single video. So this is the first video where I lay out intro to the concept of dopamine detox. This is where I introduce you guys to the concept of dopamine detox. Last week I have done a video where I introduce you guys to this video series, and today I'm going to introduce you guys to the concept of dopamine detox. And here are the 5 subtopics that we are going to talk about today. In most videos I talk about 5 subtopics. There are exceptions to it, but anyway, let's go into this. And the first subtopic that I'm going to talk about is what is dopamine. I talked about this in one of my previous videos, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more depth today, right? And the second subtopic is what does dopamine do, right? So that's an important question and an important thing to know as well, right? And the third thing is what can a dopamine imbalance do. In this case, there are 2 different scenarios that can happen: either too much dopamine or too little dopamine. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that, without making it way too complicated for the general public to understand. And the fourth subtopic of the day, what to do to optimize dopamine levels. So here's the thing, I'm going to put this disclaimer out there right now. The dopamine levels of your brain is that depends on your genetics for the most part, right? So everyone's going to be different in that regard, but you can reach your fullest potential, your optimal levels of dopamine if you know how to, right? So in this subtopic I'm going to talk about that. And last but not least, what's a dopamine detox, right? I mean, you might think that the first 4 subtopics are just fluff for me to gain YouTube revenue or whatever. By the time I record this video, my channel is not even monetized, right? It's not even monetized, but trust me, these topics are important. These topics will give you the understanding that you need in order to attack this one correctly. So all these topics are equally important. So this is going to be a fairly long video. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We are going to talk about the first subtopic first and foremost, right? What is dopamine? Dopamine is, simply put, a neuromodulator which will do a couple of different things in our body, right? But for the sake of understanding and for the sake of relevance here, I would say dopamine is what determines what excites you. That's what dictates what excites you and how much of an excitement you would get from what excites you, right? That's the only thing that that matters for us in this discussion, right? So it will determine the inhibitory and excitatory responses of your receptors, right? It will determine how that plays out. that's a little bit of scientific terms there. Don't worry, you don't have to know these scientific terms, and there are a couple of other scientific terms that I want to discuss under this subtopic as well. You don't have to know these things, but if you are a science guy, this might help you out just a little bit to initiate your research on dopamine and what it does, the chemical structure, the whole deal, right? I'm not going to go into that much detail, because the main topic of the day is the introduction to the concept of dopamine detox. So you don't have to know every single detail about dopamine in order to do that. So these disclaimer, these are going to be those overboard factors about dopamine, right? The chemical formula of dopamine is C8H11NO2, right? So you don't have to remember that. If you are a science guy, like I said, you can keep that in mind, so to speak. And the receptors that are responsible for the work of dopamine is D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, and there's a receptor called TAAR1. I believe that's how it's said. Not entirely sure about that, and it's a amine, right? The chemical group of it is amine. Another detail that that doesn't matter for this description, but like I said, again, if you're a science guy, if you're interested in these sort of scenarios, you can remember that. And there are three precursors for this, right? There are three precursors. One, L-DOPA, two, tyrosine, and this is a name that I might butcher, because I'm not a native English speaker. So it's called phenylalanine or something like that, right? The word is a little long, so I'm not a native English speaker, so there's that. So those are the things that you should know about dopamine. And the last thing I said, the precursor thing, that's gonna be a little, that's gonna play a little bit of a role later down this video. Again, there's not much to it, right? So obviously you can forget about that or remember that. Either way it's gonna work out, right? The video is gonna serve you with some sort of a value either way. So that's it for the first subtopic. And then after the first one, we are going to move on to the second subtopic of the day, which is what does dopamine do, right? So in this case, I don't want to go too much of the science guy on you, because I want to explain this in the simplest form that will be understood by the general public, right? Not everyone is a science guy. So in this case, dopamine is a neuromodulator, like I said, that helps you out in feeling the drive, feeling the motivation, feeling the excitement, happiness, things like that, right? The dopamine is playing a role in all that. So when it comes to this topic, right, what does dopamine do? Basically, if you are doing something that that brings you joy, that brings you excitement, that brings you happiness, what dopamine does is the build up, right? Dopamine is what's responsible for the build up of happiness and excitement of that activity, right? So with dopamine, it's all about the spike of dopamine from the baseline on your brain, right? Again, the dopamine baseline is different from person to person. It depends on your genetics, it depends on your diet, it depends on your sleep, it depends on your activities throughout the day. The frequently done activities and lesser frequently done activities, a whole plethora of things, right? So it's all about the dopamine spike. Where does the dopamine go from the baseline, and how that spike goes. the elevation of that spike, how big of a spike you get will determine how excitement you will get to do that activity, and how long that spike lasts will determine how long that excitement will stay with you before that activity goes momentarily stale, right? Here's an example. You scroll through the social media, and after a while, you get a little tired of it, right? Then you go to YouTube, or then you go to YouTube and listen to music, or Spotify and listen to music, something like that, something else, right? That's where that activity becomes momentarily stale, and after a while, then you can jump back up to that previous social media. That's how dopamine kind of works, right? That's the rough idea of it. Dopamine determines what excites you and how much of an excitement that gives you, and the height of the dopamine spike will determine how much of an excitement you would get from that said activity, and the duration or the length of that spike will determine how long that excitement will last. That's basically what dopamine does in your brain, right? Simply put, that's what it does. So with all that we discussed in the second topic, the second subtopic, which is what does dopamine do, here's something that is a little tricky, right? You're going to have that mindfulness, you're going to have that focus in order to balance it out throughout your day and throughout the week, months, whatever, right? You can't just go, full, like, balls to wall basically with your dopamine, because at some point you will run out, right? So that way you're gonna feel miserable and things like that. So how to balance that out, it will be discussed in this video in the fourth topic. But first, we are gonna have to go through the third subtopic, which is what can a dopamine imbalance do, right? So a dopamine imbalance can go two ways, right? One of the two ways. Either it can go too high or it can go too low, right? Let's discuss the too low first. When you are on, you have too low of dopamine levels, what will end up happening is, you will feel like depressed, anxiety, things like that, depression, anxiety, like lack of motivation, lack of drive, things like that. And in the long run, it could lead to things like psychosis, those kind of things. So it's not to be joked around with, right? And let's talk about the other end of the spectrum, right? Too high of a dopamine concentration, or it can happen like this too. It's like an uneven distribution across the brain, right? Uneven dopamine distribution across the brain. One part gets a lot, one part doesn't get, the minimum dosage that it should, all sorts of issues, right? So in that scenario, you will be unnecessarily competitive and, really aggressive, things like that in the short run. And in the long run, here's the kicker here, right? In the long run, it could lead you to all sorts of issues like, addictions, compulsions, binge eating, like gambling, things like that, right? So it can lead you to do the hyper exciting things mindlessly, right? That's what a higher end, like, having too much of dopamine usage in a shorter period of time, having a huge dopamine spike can do. That's what it can do, right? So that's the nature of an imbalance of dopamine. And in the next topic, like I said, I will talk about what to do to optimize dopamine levels, without letting it rise too high, or without letting it drop too low. What to do to keep that in that balance, keep that around the mid range. So after we discussed about the third subtopic, we are going to move on to the fourth subtopic, which is what to do to optimize dopamine levels. The kicker here is that your capability of producing dopamine depends on your genetics mostly, right? But however, there are things that you can do to make sure that your brain is at the optimal condition in order to make the most amount of dopamine that you possibly can. Just so you have more in the tank, you have more in the tank to use, and to use properly. Again, you're gonna have to be disciplined in these scenarios, right? So there are things that you can do to optimize your brain's performance in terms of dopamine production, right? Just so you have a lot of dopamine in your system, like the max amount of dopamine in your brain to be used in activities. So the first thing you have to do, like this is like twofold, right? There's not much to understand. The first thing you can do is, drum roll please, not so much, nutrition. You're optimizing your nutrition, and in this case in specific, you're gonna have to focus on consuming enough L-tyrosine, vitamin B6, folate, magnesium, copper, omega-3, and vitamin D3, right? So for the vegans out there, including myself, right? I'm a vegan myself. So for the vegans out there, you can consume omega-3 by eating, seeds and nuts, things like that. Especially, things like almonds. Any kind of nut has omega-3 in it. And, the best thing to do in terms of getting in enough vitamin D3 is to go out in the sun and get enough sunlight. And I know the vegans out there who live in who live in the countries that are close to the poles of the world, that exposure of sunlight is not an option. So for those people, supplementing vitamin D3, supplementing omega-3 on with a plant-based supplement is a good idea, right? I'm not gonna go into the whole recommendation thing. You can just type it in on Google and just find it out for yourself. It's like a 10-15 second search, literally. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail about recommendations and things like that, but those are the nutrients you should be prioritizing on. So the second subtopic under the fourth subtopic of the day is feel good activities, right? So feel good activities are basically twofold, right? There are these activities that will provide you with instant gratification and no value whatsoever in the long run. That's the type 1. And the type 2 is the activities that may or may not provide you with instant gratification, but they will help you out in being a better person, serving a purpose to the world and having that accumulative benefit over the long run, delayed gratification, so to speak. So there are those two types of activities, right? So if you ask me what to do, like how to determine what are the activities that will provide you with a greater purpose than just instant gratification, I will link the videos down below by yours truly for you to refer to in order to know everything basically on the topic, everything I've released basically on the topic, and that will help you out to get a full picture on the matter, right? What activities should you do, and the whole deal. That's it for that subtopic, and we are going to move on to the next subtopic, the last subtopic of the day, which is what's a dopamine detox. That's the moment you all have been waiting for. So let's get that done. So moving on to the last subtopic of the day, which is what's a dopamine detox, right? So there's many different, there's many different protocols and many different definitions to define what a dopamine detox truly is. So what I decided to do is to put all those eggs in a single basket and just throw it at the wall, and hopefully we will get a good mix of every single egg out there, right? So if you ask me what a dopamine detox is, it's an activity you do and an activity that will help you to be more excitable, to be more driven, to be more passionate, and to be more happy, to be happier, more happy, to be happier by avoiding the activity in itself is done by avoiding the dopamine triggers, the things that will spike your dopamine levels, right? For a set period of time. And here's the thing: when you do dopamine detoxes and when you avoid those spikes, your brain will, basically your brain circuits will break up, right? Break up, and they will rewire themselves in such a way that it doesn't need all that high of a dopamine spike to get the same excitement. So basically your sensitivity for dopamine goes up when you do dopamine detoxing. And now you know what a dopamine detox is. You know the definition of it, and there are a couple of factors that determine the benefits you would get and the nature of the benefits you would get from a dopamine detox, right? By nature I mean how long it will last, how concentrated the results would be, things of the sort. So there's a couple of factors, right? Factor number one is how much of a restriction that you are going to put yourself through, right? How much of a strict discipline that you're going to follow throughout that dopamine detox. That's number one. Factor number two is how long the dopamine detox is going to be, how long the restricted period is going to be. That's the factor number two. And the factor number three is going to be the frequency of dopamine detoxing, right? So that's the factor number three. So the deal with these factors is that you can't restrict yourself too much for too long, right? So you're going to have to find that sweet spot between the first two factors, which is factor number one, again, the restriction that you put yourself through, the degree of restriction that you put yourself through, and number two, the duration of the restricted phase, right? So you're going to have to find the sweet spot that works for you. So it's a little bit of trial and error. I can't just give out, this is the way to do it, this is the way to do it. There's my ways of doing it, the ways that I prefer to do it, but I can't tell you that these are the only ways to do it, right? Everyone's different, everyone's lifestyles are different, everyone's everything is different, right? Basically. So in that sense, you're gonna have to find out that sweet spot. And when you are ready, when your brain is ready, when you feel like this is going really smooth, you can always crank it up. You can always crank it up by keeping one of the first two factors constant and playing around with the other, like cranking up the other. Or you can just play around with both of those things and find out a different balance that's a little bit more challenging for you. That's up to you, right? That's up to you. So the deal with the third factor, the frequency, is that you should be doing this at least as frequent, uh, with a frequency where your benefits will not diminish to a point where your brain goes back to where it was, right? Does that make sense? I hope it does. If it doesn't make sense, leave a comment down below. I will explain it further. So basically what I meant is that you're gonna have to do it at least to a degree where your brain will not, to a frequency where your brain will not go back to where it was before the process started in itself, right? So but optimally, this is what you should do. You should do dopamine detoxes, one after the other, and let's say you do the first detox, and the second detox should be within 24 hours from the time you started feeling like the like highest level of benefits are diminishing. That's like if you are right here and you go 2.5 days at that level, and then you feel like that these benefits are diminishing, that starting point of the feeling of the diminishing effect, and within 24 hours from that point you should be detoxing again. That's the optimal. That's what you should do in order to keep your brain at optimal conditions, right? So that's basically what I have to mention in this case. I will go into more in detail about this protocol and what to do, what not to do, yada yada yada. Like I'm gonna go into everything that you need to know about dopamine detoxing, right, in my future videos. So that's it for today, right? This is it for today. One last thing before I go is that if you want a customized dopamine detoxing protocol that will work for you for free, then you can contact me using my social media. The links as always will be down below in the description, right? Make sure you check that out if you want to, and make sure you contact me if you want a customized dopamine detoxing protocol that works for you, right? So I'm gonna end the video right here. The whole YouTube deal, like, comment, share, subscribe, that will help my channel out a lot. And until next time, I'm High Value Guy, and may the Triple Gen bless you.